If you're a B2B founder, I'm sure you're familiar with the frustration that occurs when a deal seems like it's going to close, but 2 or 3 months into the sales process, it just suddenly falls through. And this doesn't keep happening because your product or service is inferior. And it's also not because your sales team is bad at their job. So my name is Dylan Wart, founder of Margin Maxing, and today I'm going to show you exactly why you're losing those deals, the exact funnel strategy we implement for our B2B clients to stop it from happening, and the 4 specific levers you can pull to retain narrative control and stop deals from falling through the gaps. So if you want to shorten your sales cycles and close more of the deals you start, stay with me. All right, so I'm going to assume that your acquisition system is completely dialed in. If it's not, you can check out our video that goes over the front end funnel that we build for our clients, so you can build one as well. Basically, this video is for you if your prospects are showing up consistently and they're showing up sophisticated, meaning they're showing up further down the sales cycle. But because of the B2B process, it still takes, naturally 4 to 5 calls to close these prospects, and you're having trouble with prospects ghosting you or just not following through when a deal is about to close, this video is for you. So like I said, in B2B, you have a pretty sophisticated sales process. Traditionally, when we work with clients that have shorter sales cycles, they usually have like 1 to 2 calls. Right? So we can use a model that is along the lines of a 1-call close, because most of these calls end up being 1 or maybe 2 calls. But when you have a sales process that involves 3 to 5 stakeholders, like maybe you're dealing with a prospect that has to talk to a board, these stakeholders usually take 2 to 3 months to actually make a decision. Now, what this means is your sales process is going to look more like this. So you have call 1, you have call 2, you have call 3, you have call 4, maybe even call 5, right? And in between these calls are gaps of time. And this gap of time is usually 10 to 14 days. So 10 to 14 here, 10 to 14 here, 10 to 14 here. Now add these 10 to 14 days up and you get about 60 days where you are not in control of the conversation because you're not talking to the prospect, right? You're waiting for the next call. And most B2B firms just treat this as what it is, which is a gap. So they're not really doing anything in these periods of time, except maybe trying to get them on the next call, right? Doing some sort of follow-up. Now, the problem with this is during this 60 days, your prospect isn't doing nothing, right? In fact, they're talking to competitors. They're doing their own research. They're looking at, done-for-you services. They're looking at in-house solutions. Like if they have a problem, right, that you solve, they're not just looking they're not looking at your model only. They're looking at all sorts of different solutions, which means that they are going through your sales process, but they're also going through another sales process and another sales process and another sales process and another sales process, right? So in reality, if each call is like 30 to 45 minutes long, that means in total you only have like 2.5 hours of time where you're actually talking to the prospect. Because when you're on the phone with the prospect, that's the only time during this entire process that you actually have control, meaning you can actually influence their decision. You cannot influence their decision in these other gaps, especially when they're talking to competitors and doing their own research. And what this means is out of your measly 2.5 hours, your competitors have 2 months of time, because multiple competitors, all the research that they're doing, right? You're just one of them. So you have 2.5 hours and everyone else colloquially has 2 months of time. So what this means is you are not special, right? What this means is to your prospect, you're just one of many vendors who they're currently talking to. And what this means is ultimately, when the decision is made, the deal goes to whoever has the most influence, right? Because if they're talking to multiple different people, whoever convinces them that their product is the best, aka influence, or aka, which the word I will be using throughout this video is narrative, right? Narrative basically means what the prospect actually believes about the problem and the solution to their problem. So what that means is a narrative can be crafted, right? It's like you can believe multiple different things. You can believe that your problem can be solved with a done-for-you service, or your problem could be solved with a software, or it could be solved in-house, right? It can be solved through consulting. It can be solved through hiring. So you see how like there are infinite different stories or narratives that your prospect can have. And because there's so many, and because it's really just an opinion, if you're not actively taking control of this narrative, you're going to lose to whoever does. Because at the end of the day, the only thing you need to do to control a narrative is be convincing enough, right? So what that means is you're not losing these deals because your service is bad, right? You're not losing these deals because your sales team is bad. The real reason you're losing these deals and people are ghosting you across this 60 to 90 day sales cycle is because you didn't control the narrative. So we need to reframe the problem. The problem is not, how do I stop these deals from falling through? The question you should be asking is, how do I control the narrative? So you actually do this through 4 different levers. So the first lever is sales process. The second lever is content retargeting. The third is social omnipresence. And the fourth is email nurture. So let's go in depth on each of these levers. So I said earlier that typically when we have clients that have a 1 to 2 call close sales process, typically we can use the exact system that I showed you in our previous video with the 4 different systems of pre-call nurturing, right? And if you want to learn about that, be sure to check out this video, because regardless of your sales process, this is absolutely necessary. But the difference is when you don't have this process and instead you have 3 to 5 calls and you have multiple stakeholders, you have to have a completely different approach on top of that pre-call system. So if you have this type of sales process, what you need to learn is how to plant seeds. So planting seeds is basically, I'm sure you've heard of the movie Inception, right? Inception, the premise of the movie is planting seeds, which basically means subtly reframing some sort of preconceived notion. In simpler terms, this basically means inserting ideas so that the prospect, when they get off the call with you and they go talk to a competitor, you've already planted your seeds so that when they experience your competitor either bad-mouthing your service or presenting their service as the actual solution, you've actually already helped frame your prospects so that they are not affected by the attempt of narrative control from your competitor. So let me give you an example of this, because this is a bit abstract in theory, but when you see it in practice, it's pretty simple. So let's say you're a software company, right? So as a software company, you might have a competitor that is a done-for-you service. So your software allows the prospect to solve their problem on their own, right? Now, the done-for-you service solves it for your prospect. So naturally, one of the most common seeds that the done-for-you competitor is going to try to plant is, we're faster, right? We'll solve your problem and set everything up in 10 to 14 days, right? And we'll do it all for you. It's all done for you. And therefore, software is slow, right? That's how they're going to try to frame it. But what you do by planting seeds, your job is to predict this, right? Your job is to do a combination of research and thinking about what it is that your competitors are going to say to try to sell their service over yours. Because if you can get ahead of them, then you're going to be the one planting the seeds. So what you can do in this situation, if you're the software and your competitor is a done-for-you service, well, you can come in and say, yeah, software takes some time to set up, right? Like, you're not going to deny that the done-for-you service is faster, because they are, right? But software is scale-proof, right? It takes longer because it's scale proof. And what that means is you don't ever have to do it again, right? Like you can hire, you can add more offers. Like basically it's a one and done setup. Whereas if you're doing like a sprint, it's not scale proof, right? Because it's not as thorough. So what this does is you've planted a seed that, in fact, yes, software is slower to start, right? To get set up, but that's a good thing, right? It's actually a good thing that software takes the time that it takes for you to set it up yourself and get it integrated into your company because you care about scaling, right? The prospect. So when they come to a done for you service and they say, yeah, we're faster, we'll do it in 14 days, that actually becomes a red flag for your prospect. Or at the very least, it's not really something that they're affected by because they're like, okay, their first reaction after speaking to you is, well, is this scale proof? Instead of just accepting what they're telling them. So you're probably asking like, how do I predict this, right? Well, it's pretty simple. All you have to do is just analyze your sales data. And this means like objections, like all the most common objections, questions, and assumptions that your sales team deals with on a daily basis. So just analyze all your calls, right? And also just do some, market research as well. But ultimately, you could just do the sales data because the reason why sales data is so helpful in this situation is because if you're a software company, for example, there's tons of done-for-you services, right? It's not a new thing. So the whole narrative of done for you is faster, it's easier, oh, software is so slow, that's probably a common narrative that the prospects coming into your sales funnel have already heard, right? So what that means is it becomes an objection. And that's why you need to pay attention to the objections and the questions and the assumptions that your prospects have, because that's going to give you the keys to crafting these seeds. And what you do is you take all this and you just build a list of seeds. And then you teach this to your sales team, your SDRs, your AEs. Just teach them to plant these seeds early, like the first and second calls. Plant all these seeds, get them rewired. And what this does is it primes your prospect so that you are still in control of the narrative, even when they're talking to other people. So that's just one thing that you can do. The second thing that you can do in the sales process is what's called book a meeting from a meeting, otherwise known as BAMFAM. So this is kind of like the second major part of the sales process that you need to make sure that you're implementing when you have multiple calls. Because what this does is previously follow-ups have probably been trying to get them to book another call, right? If you're not implementing BAMFAM, you're basically getting off the call with the prospect. There's no call booked for, 2 or 3 weeks out. And what this means is your follow-ups are not going to be able to be value dense. Now let me explain. So firstly, booking a meeting from a meeting. How do you do it? So basically you just say like, hey, I know that you probably have some stakeholders that you need to talk to. You have a board that you need to talk to. How long do these people usually take to make a decision? And maybe they'll say, oh, it usually takes about 2 weeks to come to a decision. So if they need 2 weeks to consult the board, then you say, okay, well, why don't we book another meeting 18 days out? And if we have to move it, that's totally fine. But let's get it on the calendar, right? Because we just want to make sure that, we don't lose track. And what this does is basically now your follow-ups, before this was bad, right? You don't want your follow-ups to basically be like, hey, when would you be available for getting on a call? Like that has nothing, like that. There's no value in that. And it doesn't do anything for your sales process. You're basically just using the valuable time in between each call to beg them to get on another call, which makes absolutely no sense. So booking a meeting during the meeting, at the end of the meeting, if you did call 1, now you already have call 2 on the calendar, which now your follow-ups can be based on value and education and basically moving the prospect down the sales funnel. So now your follow-ups can be, white papers, they can be case studies, they can be YouTube videos, lead magnets. Like instead of just checking in, right, you're actually sending them content. And what this does is if you have call 1, call 2, So call 1 was today and call 2 is 18 days later. 6 days from now, you can have your sales team send a case study and be like, hey, we recently just published a case study with one of our clients where they used our service and got XYZ result. I think it would be helpful for you to take a look at yada, yada, yada. And then 6 days later, after that, 6 days after you send the case study, you can send a YouTube video, like a how-to video, or a video breaking down your services, like maybe one specific part of the service. And you could even cater this to the prospect, right? You can take the Fathom recording, the sales transcript from the call 1. You can have your sales team, put that into ChatGPT and take the topics that were covered, maybe the pain points and the situations of the prospect, and you can find content that you've already created that caters to that prospect. And imagine how much more valuable that follow-up is going to be versus, hey, let's get on another call. Like no one wants, it's just not helpful, right? So the final thing that you can do in the sales process is agree on time frames. So agreeing on the time frame means first you want to ask your prospect, how long does it take for you to typically make, for your firm to typically make a decision like this? And they might say, oh, it takes about 60 days, right? So can we agree that within 60 days, we'll make a decision? Within the 60-day time frame, we're going to do everything on our part. My sales team, we're going to send you as much information, answer as many questions as possible for you and your board to make the best decision possible. Now, we just asked that, whether you're in or you're out, can we agree to make a decision in 60 days so that we know where we are in the process, whether you're in or you're out? Because the last thing I want to do is waste your time and also my sales team's time, if we're following up 4 or 5 months from now, right? What this does is basically, no matter who you're talking to, no one likes saying no, right? Even if you're talking to a business owner, no one really likes saying no. And so what typically happens, which I'm sure you've experienced, is they just end up ghosting you, right? So they ghost. That's the typical behavior. And the problem with that is now you're stuck following up with them, not really knowing if they're ever going to respond or not. So if you set this frame early on in the process, you give them enough time to make a decision, right? We're not trying to force them to make a quick decision or a speedy decision. We're saying, okay, well, how long do you need to make a decision? Okay, 60 days, fine. Can we agree to make a decision within 60 days? And this does two things. This reduces the pressure of saying no, so they feel comfortable saying no. And it also creates structure, right? Now you have a structured window for this sales process for this specific prospect on this specific deal, right? It's not some open-ended, I don't know when this is going to end or not, right? Like it's a structured timeline. And what that means is we kind of go back to this whole idea where you can systematize your follow-up process and it just makes everything so much easier. So just to recap, for your sales process, right, you want to be planting seeds, which means that you want to be analyzing your sales data, finding the most common objections, and then just seeing who your competition is. And you want to be creating a list that contains different seeds that you're planting in your prospect when they get on a call with your sales team, so that when they get off the call and they talk to competitors or they do research, they're not succumbing to common, heard all the time narratives, right? They're listening to your narrative. You've already rewired their brain to accept your narrative, right? The second thing that you need to be doing is booking a meeting from a meeting, and that creates the ability to send value-dense follow-ups rather than just checking in, and it also creates structure. And finally, you want to agree on time frame of the entire deal. What this does is it allows the prospect to say no comfortably, and it also establishes structure of the entire engagement. So now let's talk about the second lever, which is content retargeting. So before we get into exactly what content retargeting is, I just want to go over what the 4 axes of questions are. because this is really important when creating any sort of content that's directed at prospects who have intent, meaning prospects who are already in the sales process, right? Basically, the 4 axes of questions are the most common questions, objections, and expectations. And from these, you basically have first order questions, second order questions, objections, and expectations. So first order questions are basically like, okay, what's your product? How much does it cost? Why do I need to care? What problem does it solve? How is it different from your competitors? What are the results, right? Second order questions are basically like, okay, if you answer one of the first order questions, what question would come after that answer, right? If the prospect asks, like, what is your service? How does your service get results? So you say, okay, well, we get XYZ result with XYZ method, right? And you go into like, okay, well, these are the different steps of how we get results. These are the different mechanisms, right? So their question to that would be, okay, well, why specifically XYZ method? Like, why should I care about your method versus other methods? What makes X mechanism important? Like, why should I care about X mechanism? Does it matter? Or like, how does it compare to another method? Objections are basically like, why do I need your help when I could do this in-house? Or, your other competitors have more case studies than you. Why should I trust you? Stuff like that, where you kind of have to face basically reasons not to buy head on. And expectations are basically just what they should expect. Like, for example, we get you results in 10 to 14 days, or we don't get you results in 10 to 14 days. That is the time that it takes to, set up the infrastructure, and then you start seeing results by day 30, right? Like, you need to make sure that you're establishing these expectations. It's also like what results they should expect to get. And this is really important because from good expectations, you're going to get good case studies. And from not establishing good expectations, you're going to not get case studies because you're going to get prospects who have an unrealistic expectation of your service, and then they're going to be angry when that's not met. So with that out of the way, basically content retargeting is creating content pieces, and this is short form, like reels, basically content on a platform like Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn. These are short form video content pieces that address each specific individual first order question, second order question, objection. Each content piece answers one of these common concerns, right? And typically you would want to create 30 to 40 of these content pieces. And I just also want to say that for the content retargeting lever as a whole, you need at least 100 conversions. What this means is you need at least 100 people at a given time in your sales process. So typically this doesn't really happen until you're spending like $10,000 to $30,000 in ad spend per month. So if you're not spending at least $10,000 to $30,000 per month in ad spend, content retargeting, it's probably not going to work just because of the mechanism of the 100 conversions. Because the thing about content retargeting is this is only for people in your sales process, meaning booked calls, right? No one else sees this content. This content is targeted on Meta, right? And they're only targeting someone who booked a call. So the way that you would set this up is you would create a custom audience in the Meta Ads Manager, and it needs to dynamically update for everyone who books a call. As soon as someone books a call, they need to be automatically added. And again, these are 30 to 40 or even 50 content pieces that address the 4 axes of questions, concerns, objections, expectations. The way you want to set this up is as soon as someone watches at least 3 seconds of a video, they automatically never see that piece of content again. So the easiest way to look at this is like, okay, we have content piece 1, piece 2, piece 3, piece 4, right? So a prospect views piece 1 for longer than 3 seconds. So now they are never going to see that piece again, and it's going to bring them down to piece 2, piece 3, piece 4, just like that over and over. And what this does is it gets them to automatically consume all of your content. And this is passive, right? It's just when they're scrolling on Instagram, scrolling on Facebook, scrolling on whatever platform that you set this up for, right? Now, here's where things get a little bit more complex. So you have different strategies for content retargeting for call 1 versus call 2 to 3, right? So when someone books in, they're about to have call 1, right? And it's typically like 48 to 72 hours between, booking a call and getting on a call, just depending on your sales process and how many closers you have, et cetera, right? Typically 48 to 72 hours. So these content pieces are short form. They are pure education and pure nurture. Again, these are addressing the 4 axes of questions, objections, and expectations in short form. And your target frequency is, you want to get each prospect to see at least like 15 content pieces. And this could actually go up to, 20 to even 30. And basically this goes back to our previous video because this is basically the pre-call content retargeting system that we discussed, right? Now, what happens when you have your first call and now you're going to have call 2, call 3, and each call has, 10 to 14 days in between each call, right? So like from the time that they book to the time that call 1 happens, that's like 48 to 72 hours on average. But from call 1 to call 2, that could be typically 10 to 14 days if you're a B2B firm, right? That's completely different. And what this means is they've already consumed this content, right? What you need to do is you need to switch up your tactic to long form videos. So long form is YouTube, podcasts, like if you have podcast appearances, thought leadership, and case studies. And the goal of these content pieces is education plus authority plus social proof. And you want the parameters to be like 1 to 2 minutes watch time before they move on to the next video. Now, the goal of this content, for call 2 and call 3 is for call 2, you want them to consume around 30 pieces, and call 3, you want them to also consume another 30 pieces. And the way you get to do this is just because, the 10 to 14 day period where you can just get them to consume as much content as possible. And you want it to be as thorough as possible. Basically what you're doing with this system is you're trying to fill the space between calls with as much content as possible. So you're always top of mind, right? Every single time that a prospect views a single piece of content organically, or to them it seems organic, but you're actually targeting them, you become top of mind one more time, right? And that's extremely powerful, especially when you have these long windows when they're talking to a bunch of different competitors. And this is a huge moat. Once you have this system in place, not many firms in your competition utilize this system, meaning they're not filling that space. So you can easily become an industry leader implementing these content systems. Next, I want to go to social omnipresence. So the fact of the matter is, in every sales process, this doesn't matter if it's your sales process, your competitor's sales process, any sort of sales process that your prospect is in, they have their guard up, right? This is supposed to be a shield. They have their guard up. So they have a natural level of skepticism. And this is natural because they're trying to make the best decision for their firm as possible, right? So what happens is every time that they view content from you within the sales process, right, they're always going to view it with skepticism, naturally. And what this means is that they end up trusting their own research more so than anything that you give them, right? So they trust, Google, Reddit, and other forums, industry forums. They trust YouTube. They even trust, ChatGPT. Like, they're basically going to be doing their own research if they really want to make a good decision because they naturally trust their own research over whatever that you hand them. Now, what social omnipresence does is it actually helps them do their own research. Having a social omnipresence, it leads their research back to your content. What this means is you keep the narrative, even on the web, even on the internet, even when they're typing in Google, right? And the whole point of social omnipresence, besides controlling the narrative, is just establishing familiarity and authority. So there's 4 main branches of content within social omnipresence systems. So the first branch is Instagram organic. The second is SEO, and this includes like Google SEO as well as AI SEO. The third is YouTube organic, and the fourth is Reddit. So before I get into these, I just want to cover that these are actually the channels, and there's 4 branches of content. And this is educational, so like this is like the why, authority, which is thought leadership, social proof, which is case studies and testimonials, and then actionable, which is like how-tos, like tutorials, right? Okay, so from these branches of content, you have 4 channels, which is Instagram organic, SEO, YouTube organic, and Reddit. So typically with Instagram organic, you want to post about 30 reels, and these take from, the 4 branches of content that I just went over. You want to post 1 post per day for month 1, right? And then in the second month, you want to look at which of the reels performed the best, and you want to take your best reels, like let's say you had 6 high performing reels, organic reels. You want to take those 6, make some more variations with the same angles, and then you have like 15 to 20 reels that are based on the best ones. And you want to run them as a trial or lead magnet reel, which has a call to action. And that call to action would be to have to get a lead magnet, white papers, basically like more information, right? Like a how to. And what you do is you set up ManyChat, and in ManyChat you just set up automations to send those resources to the people who opt in, right? And then you can have an SDR go through the DMs and basically find qualified leads that could potentially book a call. And that's kind of how you scrape potential clients from organic content. But I want to hammer in the fact here that this whole organic content system is not to get clients. It is not an acquisition system. An acquisition system is still the paid ad system, right? Organic is never going to be consistent and fast enough for you to rely on it, because as soon as you use content as an acquisition system, which a lot of B2B firms unfortunately try to do, you end up relying on it. And the thing about content is it takes a while to make. It takes forever to generate clients if you were to use that as your main acquisition system. So ultimately, content is to support paid ads, right? The paid system that you already have set up. So for SEO, you just want to make articles like competitor alternatives, X product or service versus Y product or service, and then also like specific guides. And what you're going to do is you're going to take these articles, right? These SEO optimized pieces of content, and you're going to make YouTube videos with them. You're going to take your SEO content, you're going to take your Instagram content, you're going to take all of the content that you made for the 4 axes of questions, and you're going to turn all of them into YouTube videos. And for YouTube, you want to have like 20 to 30 SEO optimized videos based on the written content that you have already from your articles and all the content that you've already made. And for Reddit, basically you can hire a virtual assistant to do this, but basically you hire a VA to go to the most industry relevant subreddits, right? Whatever subreddits that are akin to your industry and what solutions your ICP and the solutions that you offer that ICP are in. And you want to have them write 10 to 15 natural, value-based comments. And the key, 10 to 15 of these per day. And the key is that they're actually relevant, right? Reddit is a very specific demographic, the people who are on Reddit. And Redditors hate any sort of blatant promotion. So if you were to be running bots doing this, like on everything, first of all, you're going to get banned. And second of all, it's just going to drag your brand's name in the dirt because people are not going to respect that. So the key here is that you have a real person doing this and it's actually relevant. So what this does is it drives traffic, to your actual page, and it causes more searches, it causes more people to enter your funnel, but it also highly influences ChatGPT or, any LLM, right? It highly influences the recommendations that AI gives when your prospect is searching for solutions or your industry using AI. Because the thing about Reddit is it's one of the most common, popularly used forums to post your opinion about things. In this case, giving reviews, posting opinions on services that a user has tried, and that's why AI tends to heavily favor or be biased towards brands that are mentioned in Reddit over and over again. I just realized that I put a 4 here instead of a 3. So for the final lever is email nurturing. So we have two different ways of tackling emails, right? So first we have the pre-call nurture sequences, and that goes back to our previous video right here. The engagement sequence, the sales lead, the objection handling, the risk reversal, all of that happens before call 1. So these are pre-call or pre-close nurture sequences. And the second is retention-based marketing. So basically what you're doing is you're taking all the content that you've created in lever 3 and you're creating individual emails out of them, and you're sending them through 3 to 4 different weekly campaigns. And the ultimate takeaway for this lever is just that one email per week is not enough to control the narrative. You need to have actual sequences that are reaching your prospect daily, that handle objections, answer the most common questions, answer second order questions that come after those questions, so on and so forth. Ultimately, with these 4 different levers, you can easily become an industry leader because most of your competitors are not doing any of this, right? They're sending 1 email a week. They're not following up. They're following up to book another call. They're not sending value-based content. They don't have content retargeting systems. They don't have a proper sales process set up. They don't have organic content systems set up. But with all of the systems that we discussed in place, you can comfortably expect a 20 to 30% increase in your likelihood of closing a prospect and closing a deal. So if you want our team to build out this exact end-to-end system for you, from the sales process optimization to the content retargeting and the email nurture, click the link in the description below to book a call. We'll take a look at your current pre-call systems, your current sales process, and see exactly what we can do to help you scale. And if you want to see the exact acquisition system we use to get these highly qualified prospects on the calendar in the first place, click the video right here on the screen, and I'll see you there. Thanks for watching.